Hi everyone, Gamar Chatima Tova. So Ben Franklin is credited for saying, nothing in life is certain except, you're so good, yes. Now some people say that they are more afraid of taxes than anything else. The irony is that many of us avoid talking about life's inevitables. We shy away from discussing some of the most important aspects of our lives, not only with those we love, but like our parents and our children and our partners, but also even with ourselves. In polite company, we run away from talking about money, how much we make, how much we spend on entertainment or education, how much we give to tzedakah, or what we put aside to pay our rent or our mortgage, how much we budget for a wedding dress or a bar mitzvah celebration, how much are our investments or our debt. But we're all dealing with these issues. In polite company, we also avoid talking about end-of-life issues, such as what's important to us in terms of our mental and physical well-being, and how we want to live our life at the end of our days. We procrastinate buying cemetery plots, even when we're advanced in our age. We avoid filling out advanced healthcare directives to help our loved ones know how to care for us. And we don't think that we're old enough to write our ethical will or buy long-term health care insurance. And so we put off all of these things, even moving into assisted living communities when our lives are objectively not safe in our own homes. Now, money and mortality are not the only conversations we run away from. For example, we shy away from discussing our sex lives, even with our partners. We bury the concern we may have for a friend who is growing too thin or too heavy right before our eyes. We avoid talking about our addictions. We deny feelings of jealousy toward a sibling, a friend, or a colleague. And we don't share the deep effect a depression may have had or is still having on our lives today. Why do we do this? Why do we avoid these conversations, not only with those we love, but also with ourselves? First, I think these issues are embarrassing and plain old difficult. And so we label them as private because they demand a deep level of vulnerability. And second, we fear that being exposed in ways that we might not be able to control or take back would be horrible. Once my parent or friend or child or partner hears what excites my heart or troubles my mind, they might think I'm crazy. And third, I think we avoid these discussions because we'd rather deny their imminence. We'd rather just put off talking about our finances, intimate life, body image, dynamics of a friendship, or end-of-life wishes, and death itself. We rationalize that when the time comes, we'll deal with it or someone else will deal with it on our behalf. But alas, here we are on Yom Kippur. Now is our opportunity to pull back the covers and talk about the issues that make us a little uncomfortable, the very topics we avoid. Yes, the rabbi is going to talk about mortality, but you're so happy I'm not talking about your sex lives. On Rosh Hashanah, it is written, on Yom Kippur, it is sealed, who shall live and who shall die. Listen to the words of Eddie Feinstein. I sat in shul for many years, reading the words of the Untitled before I realized the answer. The answer to each of these questions is me. I will. Of course, I would prefer to deflect the truth. I'd much prefer that the Untitled was about the guy 2 rows in front of me, but it's about me. And so now I read it in the first person. I will live and I will die. I will dwell in peace and I will be uprooted. I will be safe and I will be harmed. And this is the central truth of today. It's a day filled with awe and trembling because we're all so very vulnerable. You may know that Sheryl Sandberg, the CEO of Facebook and the author of Lean In, you may know that her husband David died suddenly this year. He was 46, they had 2 children. It was an absolute sudden death. And I felt such deep sadness reading her firsthand account of her suffering. She's a practicing Jew, and on the 30th day of her shloshim, of her mourning, she wrote a piece that was posted on Facebook about what she learned during those 30 days of mourning, about empathy and the ephemeral nature of life itself. And with the support of her mother and some friends, she had recently returned to work, and she wrote the following. Many of my coworkers had a look of fear in their eyes as I approached, and I knew why. They wanted to help, but they weren't sure how. Should I mention it? Should I not mention it? And if I mention it, what the hell do I say? And I realized that to restore closeness with my colleagues that has always been so important to me, I needed to let them in. And so she allowed her colleagues to ask any question that they wanted of her. And she would be honest in her response. Some of them mentioned that they would just drive by her house, petrified, not knowing what to say. Others said that they were having such a hard time working with her. And she recognized that once she opened up to freely talk about these issues, that no one could do wrong anymore. And then she ended by sharing one of her favorite cartoons, you know, the kind you clip out from the New Yorker and you used to put on your fridge when the fridge was magnetized. So it simply is a picture of an elephant in a room, and he's answering the phone. And when he answers the phone, he says, "Hi, it's the elephant in the room." And just as Sheryl Sandberg invited her close friends and colleagues to engage with her about death and mourning, today is the day that we do that. And we ask ourselves how to create a life with meaning. And though these discussions, I really believe, need to start with ourselves and in our own hearts, we have to have the courage then to share these discussions with those we love and with our caretakers. Now, sermons are always personal. And as you know, my father died 3 years ago, and my mother suffered from traumatic brain injury due to the accident that ultimately killed him. And it's been a very difficult 3 years managing my mother's care. She lives in New York, so it's across the country. And as her only daughter, it's sad for me to see her deteriorate, to determine what's best for her, to respect her concerns and values, and of course to confront the inevitability that her days are numbered. And I know, just looking out here, I know so many of you have gone through a similar process of managing the illness of a spouse or a sibling, a parent. And I'm grateful for all of you who have shared your stories of wisdom and sympathy with me. Yom Kippur is the day when we confront these stories. We rehearse our death. We wear white like a corpse does. We don't eat or drink like the deceased. We review our life and say vidui, the prayer that we say on our deathbed. And we do this without our masks, our armor, and our distractions. But most of life is not Yom Kippur. And once today is over, the sad truth is that when we turn to those people who we assume are specialists in addressing the ultimate questions of life and death and illness and what matters to us most, they often avoid these discussions. I don't know how many of you have read the book Being Mortal by Dr. Atul Gawande. If you've read it, just let me know. Not many. Oh, okay. Some of you. Thank you, Maurice. It's a really fabulous book by a doctor who is a teacher at Harvard, and he talks about the history of elder care in the United States. And he admits that even though his entire practice is dealing with people who are at the end of his life, end of their lives, he hardly ever brings up the subject with them. Why? Crassly put, Dr. Gawande says that most doctors aren't paid for these discussions. Most doctors get paid to perform procedures, to give vaccinations, write prescriptions, run a test, take a biopsy, or operate. And also, perhaps, if doctors engaged in these discussions with us all the time, perhaps it would involve them being very vulnerable, and it would be constantly debilitating. And even when a doctor does sit down and have these discussions, they're thinking about the people in the waiting room or the insurance company that's asking them to have a certain amount of patients within an hour. And on top of these challenges, Dr. Gawande notes that many doctors see themselves as either paternalistic, just, do as I say, I know best, or informative, like, here are all of your options, you choose, get back to me. But neither one of these approaches is what we desire. Yes, we want information and control, but we also want guidance. Dr. Gawande now advocates a third approach to medicine called interpretive relationship. And I think this has a lot to do with what our mission is here today on Yom Kippur. As an interpretive doctor, Gawande now asks his ill patients 4 questions. And these are our 4 questions for each of us today. What is your understanding of what's happening to you? What are your fears if they should happen? What are your goals if your condition worsens? And what trade-offs are you willing to make and not make to try and stop or slow down what's happening? And then once Dr. Gawande hears his patient's answers to these questions, he can then say, okay, this little red pill or blue pill or chemo or hospice or operation will probably be your best choice. Now, sadly, some of us in this room, I know, are struggling with life-threatening illnesses. And these questions keep us up, not only at night, but around the dinner table. They throw us into a panic. And my heart goes out to all of us here in that situation. However, I think most of us settle into the luxury of good health and just coast through our routines, avoiding the fact that each day is another day closer to our end, no matter our current health. Our condition that we all face is the finitude of life. Mortality is today's elephant in the room. Who shall live and who shall die? And no matter our physical or psychological strength or weakness, we can translate Dr. Gawande's 4 questions on Yom Kippur for ourselves. Ask yourself, what is your life's condition? What do you fear most? What matters most to you? And what trade-offs are you willing to make? These questions of self-reflection can be a rich starting point for a conversation with ourselves and with those we love. And they're a way for us to define how we can make meaning in our lives today. David Brooks, the columnist from the New York Times, wrote a great book this year called The Road to Character. And in it, he references the 2 types of Adams that are written about in the book of Genesis. Genesis 1 has an Adam that is told to be fruitful and multiply, to watch over the earth. He has a mission and a vision. And in Genesis 2, Adam there is a totally different archetype. That Adam is a nefesh chaya, a living and breathing life. This Adam's existence is linked to God's breath. His mission is to see himself as an extension of the holy. And Brooks suggests that these 2 Adams are in constant conflict with each other, because Adam 1 is about living our lives for our resume, and Adam 2 is about living our lives for our eulogy. Adam 1 is career-oriented and ambitious. He wants to build and create. He lives for his resume. And Adam 2 is more internal. He wants to embody moral qualities. He's quiet. He does good in order to be good. He's the Adam who's writing his eulogy. Adam 1 wants to conquer the world. Adam 2 wants to obey the calling of his soul to serve the world. And Brooks notes that our greatest failure, notes that success can lead to our greatest failure, which is pride, while failure can be a path to our greatest success, which is humility and learning. And here's where Yom Kippur fits in. In the quiet of today, when you get lost in Shelley's beautiful music and you're chanting along, pause and ask yourself, which Adam do you nurture? The Adam who's more alert, or the Adam who's sleepwalking? Which Adam has a clearer voice? Which is muffled? Which Adam shall live, and which Adam shall die? And once we admit which Adam we're cultivating, the Adam who writes our resume or the Adam who writes our eulogy, we'll be able to more clearly revisit those 4 questions. What is my life's condition? What do I fear most? What matters most to me? And what trade-offs am I willing to make? Recently, I was confronted with these questions at this year's Temple Israel of Hollywood Women's Retreat. Charlotte Spiegelman held a session called Aging for Women of All Ages, and we all crammed into a room. And I sat in silence next to my mother, trying to practice a measure of humility. And I was so moved by one woman who shared that she believed her whole identity was wrapped up in her profession, and she was nervous about retirement. But now, once retired, she was reinvigorated with her volunteer work. And I was touched by another woman who shared that her family is very dear to her, but she realizes that they're sort of busy And she needs to nurture her own friendships more. And I was shaken by another woman who shared how difficult it is for her to ask for help. These women opened a door for me to reflect on what's important in my life. How do I identify as a rabbi, a mother, a wife, a sister, a friend, and which one comes first and when? Do I nurture my friendships enough? Do I ask for help? Ultimately, how am I spending my hours? And are they in concert with my life's values? We all know that what we say is important to us, and how we actually spend our time may be diametrically opposed to one another. Engaging in uncomfortable questions around money and finance, sex and weight, illness, aging, and death is a first step toward bringing the say and the do closer together. By saying what's important to us, we can then take action and do. So this year, I invite you to continue this discussion with me and with Rabbi Rozov. He'll be teaching a class in early January called Writing Our Ethical Wills. And I'll be continuing with a discussion with Charlotte Spiegelman and Dr. Susie Mandel called Celebrating Life in Transition, the Challenges, Joys, and Wisdom of Later Years. And I encourage you to sign up for these opportunities for continued personal and spiritual reflection. Yom Kippur is a day we rehearse our deaths. We look at our mortality, eye to eye. So how do we begin? We begin by asking ourselves those same 4 questions Dr. Gawande asks his patients. What is my life's condition? What do I fear most? What matters most to me? And what trade-offs am I willing to make? And then we open our hearts to hear those answers. And then we share those answers with someone who we love. Nudge yourself gently to enter these discussions of mortality and life's difficult issues. Be forgiving of yourself and be non-judgmental toward your answers. Because remember, in life, nothing is certain except death and taxes. Shana Tova, everyone.